say welcome. We're glad that you're here. And it was funny, Michael said, can you come and just speak for a few minutes and share your pioneer story? I'm like, yeah, here's my story. Don't do it. Run for your life. It's not worth it. Changing the world will stress you out, and it's just too much. So I'm just kidding. I do get through many times, though, thinking when I'm 90 years old, I don't want to look back and think I never took a chance, I never took a risk, I didn't live with faith. But every once in a while, it sure sounds comforting to imagine life like that. I do feel like this as well, and this is honest truth. I feel a little bit I don't feel qualified quite yet to be able to talk fully on pioneering. A little bit because I remember T.D. Jakes. I heard him on TV one time. He used a great illustration. He said he hates it whenever he's watching TV and a young couple that's been married for 2 years are on there giving marital advice. You know, he's just as like, he says people all the time when he had teenagers, they would come up to him and be like, you should write a book on parenting. You should write a book on parenting. And he said, I'll write a book on parenting if I get through parenting. He said, right now, I've got an eye patch on. I got on my arm in a sling. I'm limping. And he said, I'm yelling, every man for himself. And I feel like that a little bit. Like I feel like I'll be able to talk about this if I get through it. But right now I'm in the middle of it, so it's probably a little bit hard to give you full advice, but I can share my story at least, and at least we can all be in it together. I've got about 30 minutes with you. I want to share a little bit of my story and then just a few quick principles that will be just shotgun approach. But I've lived in Reading my entire life, born and raised, so in 3 weeks, this will be the first time I've ever really picked up and moved outside of Reading. I lived for 9 months in a Christian college dorm, if that counts as my seeing the world. And so we'll pick up and move in just a few weeks. So it's a pretty big move for us. But I've lived here my entire life. I grew up Baptist, started going to Bethel before Bill was there in 1993 when I was a senior in high school, and I really encountered the Lord there for the first time. It was just, went to Christian school my whole life, but when I was 17, in the summer of 93, I started going to the youth group here at Bethel. It was actually in a different building and a different location. And I'd never really thought about, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. That's what I was going to go do. I announced baseball games during the summer, and I really enjoyed it. So I just wanted to go do that for a living. And I remember the youth pastor, I'd started going to youth group, and the youth pastor had invited me to come out to a Sunday night service he was speaking at. And he came out, and I came out to a Sunday night service. And he spoke a great message, and at the end of it, he gave, they would preach to the altar, not the salvation altar, but like respond to the message altar. So at the end, as they always would do, they would say, hey, come and respond to this message right now, and come. And so we would, we'd respond to an altar on a regular basis. So I remember that he gave an altar call for the message, and I'm 17 sitting there, and I walked forward, and I knelt down, and I said, God, if I'm going to do this Christianity thing, I'm going to do it 100%, and no lightning bolts, no anything, no goosebumps. I just said, Lord, I'm going to do this Christianity thing 100%. And I went home that night, and to the best of my knowledge, had never, ever thought about being in ministry. And I went home that night, and I said, Mom, I want to preach. That's what I want to do with my life. I want to preach. And everything changed for me. And I knew that's what I wanted to give my life to. And so I spent my senior year at a Christian school, just leading and dove headfirst into youth group and leading there and preaching a little bit and doing little Christian clubs and bringing people and all that stuff. And my plan was to go, I was going to get out of high school, graduate. I was going to go to a 4-year Bible college, go 4 years through Bible college, find an itinerant minister, be with them for a year, and then just start traveling. I'd read a book on Billy Graham, his biography, Iverna Tompkins and Sean Smith, and different ones that come through our church. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to travel and preach. That's what I want to do. And as I'm 18, I have nothing to say at all, but it sure felt like I did. And I'm like, I want to travel and preach. That's what I'm going to do. And so I go out, I go to school for a year down in Southern California for 9 months. And the youth pastor calls me and says, why don't you come back and do an internship with us? And so I said, all right. So I come back to do an internship for school credits for a semester. At the end of that semester, so I'm 19, at the end of that semester, he says, why don't you stay a whole year? You'll get more out of the internship. So I said, all right. I stayed a year. And after that year, he came to me and said, Bill had come by this time in my internship year. he came to me and said, we would like to start an associate youth pastor position, and we'd like to have you on. And I said, all right. I was starting to date CJ, who I later married. And so I said, all right, I'll stay. And so I kind of stayed, didn't go back to school, don't even know why. And stayed, but I was always planning on leaving. I was going to go, in fact, there's a guy named Floyd McClung that I wanted to go with. He had like a discipleship school. I was going to go be with him and then travel and preach. And about 10 months into me being the associate youth pastor, the youth pastor came to me and said, hey, Bill would like, I'm leaving to plant a church. Bill would like you to be the youth pastor. And so I was 21. This is in 97. And I said, no. I said, I don't feel called to young people, and I don't feel called to the local church. I just want to travel and preach. And so I said no. I told him no. And he said, well, Bill really thinks you're going to. And I'm like, well, Bill's wrong. I'm not going to. And he said, all right, but he thinks you're going to. I'm like, all right, well, I'm not. I don't feel called to the local church or young people. And I said no, and then the school that I thought I was going to never got back to me, so I came and I said, hey, I'll youth pastor. It was just kind of the door that was open in front of me, and I don't even know if I prayed into it. I just thought it'd be fun to be in charge. And that honestly went through my head. I thought it'd be fun to be the number one guy. And I said yes, and that started a journey for me of being in over my head, not knowing what I'm doing at all, but absolutely falling in love with the local church and falling in love with youth and young adults. And that started the road for me, and I just got hooked. And then a few years into that, let me back up a little bit. When I was 17 in high school, I started seeing things when I would daydream, and I don't fully know how to put it in words, but I remember as a 17-year-old, as a senior in high school, when I really said, God, I'm going to go for you. I had no grid for any of this stuff either. Like, we had no grid for revival or the prophetic, any of that. I remember being in my chair in class, and I remember seeing a stadium full of people, and me and my friends were on stage, and I was just about to get up and preach. And I remember seeing churches that were packed with people when I was preaching. It was so packed that people were like looking in the windows, and they were out on this kind of front porch area looking in, trying to hear the word. And I remember having these things and dreams of some supernatural stuff and different things. So I had some of those experiences at 17, and then I get into the church, and renewal hits, and the prophetic revival gets introduced to me. I begin to find out why I'm alive. I didn't know nations can be saved. I didn't know cities can be transformed. Like, I didn't know outpourings of the Holy Spirit. I didn't know the supernatural. All of that got introduced to me, and I really did find out this is why I'm alive. I'm going to give the rest of my life to see revival in the nations. And in that time, in my early 20s, a massive prophetic swirl, like dreams in the night, getting pulled out of meetings, just this really intense time of the prophetic happening in my life. Were things like that were just now beginning to scratch the surface up. In fact, some of the stuff we're seeing right now isn't even but the very beginning of what I've really seen in my spirit from my early 20s, from when I was 17 and early 20s. I'm 37 now. And so all this stuff was going, and I could give you dream after dream about the stuff the Lord was showing me about influencing leaders and nations and stadiums and all this type of stuff. But the Lord really just started downloading real season of the secret place, like the school of the secret place, like the Lord just took me and baptized me in the school of the secret place, and just really learning about prayer and just giving myself to that stuff. And then, started having kids and all that stuff. And then in 99, we started a youth conference. Like, just said, hey, let's start a youth conference. Bethel had been doing a couple conferences, and we said, let's do a conference. So we do, and we call it Jesus Culture because, actually I was walking through the mall. Do you remember the brand Counterculture? Remember they used to have a brand called that? I was walking through the mall, and there was like a hat that said Counterculture. And I remember saying, that's what I want to do. I want to raise up a counterculture in America, but I don't just want it to be a counterculture. I want it to be a Jesus culture. This is the thought that I had. And I go back to our team and said, let's call the conference Jesus Culture. So we do in 99, that's what we call it, just, randomly. And the Lord starts showing up. Like, God starts showing up. And I don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to skip forward. But the Lord starts showing up. And in 2000, the Lord starts really stirring my heart, too, to take this stuff out. And we kind of record a CD and then all of a sudden somebody puts it on YouTube and things start exploding from that. And we start going like, well, let's take it out, And so we go to Atlanta and there's like 300 people that come to Atlanta, and we go to England and we have like 125 that come, and we have no idea what we're doing at all. I have no idea at all what we're doing, but we're like, let's just go do this. Like we feel like the Lord's telling us to go. And so we start taking out. And it was probably around 2006, 2007 that we really started saying, let's like actually put some structure around this, think more movement, think more how do we do this. And so from that, I don't want to get into our whole story, but from that things start growing and events and campus stuff and resources and leaders. And then, and having no clue, like I'm not saying this like, zero clue what we're doing, like have absolutely no idea except for like, let's go do this and let's go try this out, and what about this, and early on the Lord told me, I'll share this briefly, he just really got in my face and said, you have to let me build your ministry. He said, let me build your ministry. And so we're like, all right, all right, that sounds good, and he just started building it. And so we just started going in over our head, like so far in over my head. And then, we go, and in 2011, we start moving towards the stadiums, the vision the Lord gave us for stadiums, which is all these prophetic words along the way about stadiums being full of a generation seeking God and stadiums being full of signs and wonders. And so we go to Chicago, most pressure I have ever felt, hands down, easily most pressure I've ever felt. I never felt that much pressure. Like we go from our biggest event being about 100,000 to Chicago being 1.2 million to put on, and just completely overwhelmed with the thought of that. And walking around Chicago 3 days before the event, just crying. Like walking around just crying, God. Like I was just so overwhelmed with what was going on. And I remember Matt Redman came out with a CD then, and that song, Never Walk Alone? Whatever the song is, I have it on repeat, just walking around Chicago, like, I never have to walk alone, come on. And, but just saw God show up in such significant ways, both with his presence and finances, the whole thing, and just moving towards this thing, and the Lord really giving us a mandate. Like, one of the things I'd say is, like, really paying attention to the word of the Lord and believing him. Like what he said, I believe that. So, he just got in our face and said, there's a new breed of revivalist emerging in the earth today because of my heart for cities and nations. And I want you to mobilize them, equip them, train them, encourage them, send them. And so we just said, all right. And we just said, let's go do that. And we just did everything we can and just continually to pound in and trumpet that message. There's a new breed in the earth today. And really going after that, and the prophetic swirl around that, and the Lord showing us what he wants to release and finding our niche in the middle of it in the nation. And so through all that mandate, raising up leaders and raising up revivalists and seeing nations transformed, and I'm rushing through a bunch of this story, but really in the midst of that, every step of the way, the prophetic word coming to us. So Lou Engle comes into my life probably in 99, I guess, probably in 99, right when this whole thing starts. Lou Engle comes into my life, and I remember him in a meeting with us releasing the dream stream on our team. He said, I'm just going to release a dream stream over you guys, and following him and seeing such a prophetic swirl around him in regards to really getting the word of the Lord for something. And the Lord just started releasing this prophetic thing where it was just like, He just began to release prophetic after prophetic, dream after dream type thing that was directing us as we went. No idea what we're doing, but doing the best we can to follow what he was saying. And then through all of that, ending up where we are now, which is the Lord really stirring our hearts at the end of last year to have a local expression of what's on our heart nationally and what we've done, and praying into all that. And every step of the way for us has been some prophetic word that's come. And the prophetic's intriguing too, because most of the time it's just confirmation for what's already in your heart. I don't know if I've encountered the prophetic in too many times where it's actually fresh revelation, if that makes sense. It's usually always more confirmation of that's what was in my heart, that's what I was feeling. So every step of the way was this prophetic word. And even this was like getting into a prophetic swirl around, we're supposed to go plant a church. We're supposed to go lead a local community, have a local expression of what we've been birthing in the nation and in the nations around revivalists being raised up and leaders being released and campuses and worship and all this type of stuff. So, ending up to here we are and building a team as well. I mean, really building and establishing a team the last 5 years and just having that team say, let's go do this. Let's go plant a local expression. And really praying into that, asking, Lord, what does that look like? 2 years ago, one of the things last year, I joke with you a little bit about don't be a pioneer, it's too stressful. But last year, hands down, the most stressful stressful year of my entire life. It was just more wrestling than I've ever done before, and losing a bunch of money at events and fires on the staff and just a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that got me through last year was a dream that somebody had sent me in 2011 right before we went to Chicago. And the dream was this girl the girl that had the dream was in a building in Sacramento, and she was walking through the building. And she saw my name on a door. And she said, I didn't know Banning had an office in Sacramento. And when she said that, Oprah Winfrey walks out of a door and says, Banning's on my show today, come with me. And she walks her back into a green room, and I'm sitting there with some young people in a green room. And we go out onto the show with Oprah, but instead of sitting down with her, we started ministering and started a healing meeting with our audience. And all these people are getting healed, and Oprah's sitting there watching it. And I sit down with Oprah. So I was 35 when she sent this dream. And I sat down with Oprah and I said, Oprah, I'm 39 years old and our ministry has exploded in the secular realm. And I said, just like Jesus was released before he was 40, we've been released. And then from there, there's an encounter I had with a young adult who had been hurt by church in this dream. But that dream is what got me through last year. Because literally, I said I was 39, and it was a positive explosion, not a negative explosion in the dream. And so there were times last year when I thought, okay, I make it till I'm 39. I know I make it till I'm 39. I know that this doesn't kill me, and I know that this whole thing doesn't crumble around me. We make it, it was a positive dream, and I was 39. I'm not, like we laugh, but I seriously, many times last year was like, okay, I made it till I'm 39. So from that though, just knowing just my wife and I praying in and really praying with our leaders, the issue of covering and being under covering and being sent and being in community is a massive part of who we've been. Praying with our leaders in our community, are we supposed to go do this? Praying with my wife and saying, the Lord spoke to us about Sacramento, we're supposed to go to Sacramento. So it's been a wild ride, and I probably am rushing over so many things, but it's really been an incredible ride. And I actually am not joking with you, and I feel like I don't really feel qualified to have this conversation yet, because I do feel like I'm just, I got my arm in a sling, I'm limping, just yelling, hey, you're on your own, fend for yourself. I'm trying to make it over here, Have fun. I want to give you 5. I'm going to fly through these. I have 10 minutes. 2 minutes each, 5 quick things that I think, as far as when I look and say, what are some of these things that I've learned as I'm on this journey, still on this journey of really stepping out and being a pioneer, which honestly is the scariest thing I've ever done. Scariest thing I've ever done. Very much having to learn how to rest, very much having to learn how to trust the Lord. Just scariest thing I've ever done is, and there's a reason why people don't do this stuff. It's just way easier to live safe. I want to live safe and I want to live guarded, and I don't it's just way easier to live safe. And there are times when it feels so tempting and appealing just to live safe. I don't want to I'm scared out of my mind right now. And but at the other side of it, I'm like, dude, I don't know how. I couldn't live anywhere else. I couldn't live any other way, 5 quick things. Are you ready? I'll give 2 minutes each to them. For us, the journey has been, you've got to get the word of the Lord. You have to get the word of the Lord, and that word unfolds over years. But early on for us, the Lord, he really, really spoke to us clearly. And he unfolded, it wasn't in one piece, it came in pieces. And we had to begin to assimilate these pieces, but there was a word of the Lord that we were to carry. there was a word of the Lord that was on us. And it's the only thing that's really gotten us through stuff. When we went to Chicago, the pressure that I felt in Chicago, the only thing that got me through that was I knew what he said. Like, I know what he said. I know what he said. And I honestly thought, if this whole thing falls down around me, and it might, we went in $200,000 short. When we said yes to that, I had no idea if people were going to come. And listen, the next year we went to, we had 14,000 come to New York. We went the next year in Chicago. The next year we went to New York, got a 13,000 seater and had 5,000 come, which I'm stoked about that 5,000 came, but we got a 13,000 seater. So like, we're in Chicago and like people, who knows if people were going to come or not. We're $200,000 short going in. And you're just in the mode where you budget $90,000. You budget $90,000 for union fees, and in the middle of the event, God's showing up and people are just like encountering Jesus and all this stuff. And I'm in the back room. We budgeted $90,000 and the union gives us a bill for $210,000. And we're already $200,000 short. I'm like, well, the only thing that got this through this was I know what he said. Like, I know what he said. And at least I said yes. This is honestly was my stance. I thought if everything crumbles around me, at least I said yes. At least at the end of the day, I said yes. And but you have to get to the word of the Lord. I do not know how you do this without getting the word of the Lord. I really don't. And I don't know how you do it without getting the word of the Lord. And I can give you scriptures for all this, but just trust me. I don't know how you do this without getting the word of the Lord. Without really genuinely saying, I know what he said. And I believe him. And I'm going to press in on that thing. And if it all goes downhill, at least I said yes to the word. And you've got to go get that. And again, the Lord has really, it's been years, but he has really kind of revealed this to me in so many different things. The second thing is this. I mentioned this, but you have to let the Lord build your ministry. Like, this isn't just a good bumper sticker. This isn't just something to say. You genuinely have to let the Lord build your ministry. He is phenomenal at building. You have to let him build your ministry. There's a lot of people that I see that out of zeal or, it's interesting, in Psalms it says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor in vain. And in John, it actually talks about that which is born of the Spirit is spirit, that which is born of the flesh is flesh. And it actually talks about in John 1 that it talks about the will of the flesh, something being born from the will of the flesh. That there is a stance that you can take as a pioneer where if you don't allow him to build your ministry, you can actually birth things in the flesh that can't be sustained. That the things that are born in the flesh are dead, things that are born in the spirit are alive. So many of us birth stillborn babies because we're birthing them in the flesh, not allowing him to birth them in the spirit. And we make things happen, or we open doors that aren't meant to be opened, or we push things, or you have to be very, very careful and very, very deliberate that the Lord is building this thing. He is building this. And what I'm putting my hands to is what he's building, not just what I'm building. And these all could probably get unpacked, but you'll have to just deal with it. Understand timing. Listen, these are 5 quick principles. You've got to understand timing. This is really, really important. It's one of the main things that I think throws people off. The nature of the visionaries in this room is that you see ahead. As a visionary, I see ahead. The issue is not seeing ahead, it is understanding timing. And this is why community is so important, because community and covering are who help you figure out timing. So as a leader, if you get isolated, I'm just telling you, your ability to judge the timing of the Lord is off. And timing is huge. I would say this, that the vineyard, there's a book called The Quest for the Radical Middle, which is kind of a history of the vineyard. We owe the vineyard a ton when it comes to prophetic ministry. But one of the things that threw them off was not understanding timing in connection with the prophetic ministry. So the prophetic would come, but because they were so forerunners in it, the prophetic would come, but they didn't understand the nature of timing, that it wasn't going to happen in 6 months. It necessarily wasn't going to happen in a year. It wasn't the wrong word if it didn't happen in 2 years. Timing's critical. And one of the people, the people that I think that make it are not just the ones that get the word of the Lord, but understand timing in that process. And timing's very hard because I would say as visionaries, you are so far down the road that everything feels slow. Everything's slow. And whatever pace you're at, it still feels slow. And it's very hard because the Lord shows you stuff. He shows you stuff, and then he's like, let's go on a journey for 20 years figuring that out. And the crazy thing is you feel ready when he shows it to you. I say this with love in my heart, but you are not as far along as you think you are. Like, just to understand that. Like, you feel, like I felt at 20, an anointing on my life. And I felt at 20, an anointing and a call. And I felt ready for things that there was no way I was ready for them, but I felt it in me. I felt what the Lord wanted to do. So timing's hard because I feel ready when I'm not ready. And so the Lord goes a lot slower than I ever imagined. He is slow. And he's okay being slow. He's just not in a hurry. It's amazing. The sense of urgency I feel, he doesn't feel. He's just a lot slower than we imagine for us, who is just, so timing's huge, and timing, I think, throws people off. A lot of people get disillusioned. They get distracted. They get discouraged. They get all of that simply because of timing. And I think sometimes people that are successful just outlast everybody else. I'm serious. It's like, why is that conference successful? I don't know. We kept doing it, you know? Like, I don't know. We just outlast things sometimes. It doesn't sound spiritual, but just the ability to outlast something. There's a lot of people that have fallen by the wayside simply because they just couldn't trust his timing, and they just couldn't be all right with the slowness of his process. Of course, he's not slow, but he feels slow. Are you with me? And his process many times is slow. You have to understand timing and understand that just because you see something doesn't mean you're ready for it, nor does it mean that it's timing for it. Right? And you have to be in fact, Bob Jones gave me a word. He said this years ago. He said, you know what your test is? He said, Banning, your test will be whether or not you get ahead of the Lord. I want to run ahead of the Lord a lot. I want to run ahead of him. And my test is whether or not I can stop and go the same pace that he's going. And when I get ahead of him, I would say most of us are not in the boat of falling behind. Like that's, most of us in the room, our problem is getting ahead, not behind. It's a journey of trust. This is a big one. These are the things I learned. Get the word of the Lord. Let the Lord build your ministry. Understand timing. It's a journey of trust. It is a massive journey of trust. As a pioneer, you are off the map and on the, and you're out on a branch. You're out on a limb. These are true things. You're on the edge of a cliff. You're off the map. You're out on a limb. All these things. It is one of the biggest trust journeys. And I guess the Christian walk is one massive trust journey. But especially as leaders and pioneers, the thing that I'm still in the middle of is, do I trust the Lord? 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 I trust him. I trust him with my future, and I trust him with my kids, and I trust him with my life, and I trust him with my finances, and I trust him. Do I trust the Lord? We put ourselves in positions. Jonathan, his armor bearer, are standing at the bottom of this hill, looking up at an army, thinking, God better be at the top of that mountain unless this doesn't work out for us. Like this doesn't work out for us. Do I trust him? Do I trust that he's going to be at the top of that mountain? Do I really trust him? Going down to plant a church, I'm like, all right, do I really trust the Lord? And I'm going to tell you, man, that thing will get tested and tested and tested and tested. Do I really trust him? And does my life actually reflect that trust? And then the fifth one, and then I'll be done. But the fifth one is, these are all the things that I'm either learning or have learned. You need to be very careful as a pioneer about the need for significance and ambition. you've got to be motivated by faithfulness and obedience, and significance and ambition are just really dangerous things for us. I have a high need for significance. Like I have a high need for significance. I want to be significant in the earth. But that cannot be the motivating factor in my life. Like faithfulness and obedience, that's what I have to lock in on. That's what I have to lock in on. Faithfulness, obedience, that's what I want. Ambition, significance, those cannot be the driving forces of my life. And, and the very thing that allows you to have that strong forehead, the very thing that allows you to think ahead, the very thing that allows you to dream big and have a drive and be proactive, all of that tends to lean towards that need for significance and that ambitious thing. But you got to pull all that back and say, at the end of the day, I just want to be faithful and obedient. I just want to be faithful and obedient. So even as so anyways, that's that's my quick story, and those are 5 things I learned. That quick story and 5 things as far as like getting those things down, I think will be massive for you. So